Hey, I'm Pat, and in this video I will be explaining data store service in Roblox Studio. Data stores are basically a way of you saving data in Roblox Studio. It's kind of a way of using a database, but it's kind of a little dumbed down and simple, and it's very limited in what you can do with it, and it's not exactly completely reliable as well. So what I have now is like a simple leaderstats script and a click detector part that gives me some coins when I click it. So you can see as I click it, I get a ton of coins, right? Like I got like 200 coins right now, so that's awesome. So now say I want to go outside, touch some grass, maybe like punch a squirrel or something, right? And I come back to the game and I press play and I get into the game and all my coins are gone. None of them saved. No coins. I'm poor now, right? So what we want to do is figure out how to save these coins in a reliable way that whenever a player joins the game, they will have their coins back, pretty much autosave. So data stores can get kind of complicated, but in reality they are not exactly as advanced or complicated as a lot of people like to make them out to be. And a lot of people, I think, overthink how they work and things like that. So in this video, I'll try and be going over it in a logical way that should make sense. Before you watch this video, though, I highly recommend you have a good understanding of tables or dictionaries. Just all that stuff is very important to help you in this video for sure. If you don't, you can still learn them, but learn data store service, but it's still very important to understand how tables work, because they are a very crucial thing for managing data. Very, very important. So the first thing we're going to do, obviously, is we're going to get our data store service. So I'm just going to call it DS for short. We're going to do game get service, data store service. I'm going to be honest with you, it's been a minute since I used data store service, so stick with me as I try and figure out how to use it again. So the way data store service works in a simple way is we get the service, right? And we have different data stores, and each of them have their own name, which is a string. So their name's going to be a string pretty much. And you can think of each data store as being like a table of its own time. It's its own table, right? So the table has its name like it would if it had a variable name, right? And it also has indexes or keys. Indexes can also be referred to as keys. Usually they're referred to as keys when it's in a dictionary or something like that, or when it's not a numerical index. And they also have a value, just the same as a table or dictionary would, right? So that's how a data store is. It's like it has a name, and then it has keys and values stored inside of it that can be accessed to pretty much save data globally. So you can think of it as like a global table that is saved like across servers, kind of. It's not exactly what it is, but it's a very similar idea, so it's kind of a good way of thinking about it, in my opinion. So we're going to make a variable called save, and what we're going to do is do data store, and we're going to use a method called, I think it's get data store, yeah. And this is where we get our data store by its name. So honestly, we don't currently have any data stores in this game, but we can pretty much create a data store if it doesn't have a data store. So get data store, if it doesn't find the data store with the name you give it, it'll create a new one pretty much that's empty. So we're just going to call it save1. And say if you want to reset data and start over again, you can just change the name of this data store, and then it'll go back to like an empty data store pretty much, right? An empty table, if you want to say. And the thing is, it doesn't work as like a normal table, right? So we're gonna have to use methods to get and set the data or the values inside of our so-called data store or table, if you want. So the next thing I'm going to go over, which is actually pretty important, it's not exactly related to data stores, it's kind of like its own thing, but it's very useful for things like data stores. It's called a pcall. So what a pcall is is basically it's a function, and it takes a function as the first argument. Similar to connect, how connect's like a method or a function, you can also call it a function. And it takes a function, you can see here in its parentheses, it takes a function as the first argument, right? But a pcall will also return two things as well. It will return success and it will return error. And the thing about pcall is it's basically, so alright, I still haven't explained what a pcall is, have I? So right, so it's a function and it takes a function arguments, and what it'll do is it'll run the function that it was given, and if the function errors, your script won't break. So like on a normal circumstance, if you get an error in your script, the whole script will stop running immediately. But in this case, instead of your script breaking and stopping where it is, it will keep going, and it will also return the error message, so you can print out the error message, and it will also tell you if the function ran successfully without an error, pretty much, is how a pcall works. So it's very useful for things like data stores, because when you're getting a data store, there's a good chance of there being an error or something like that. And it's a similar thing for something like HTTP service, god damn it, where if you're making requests to like a web server or an API or something like that, there's a chance that you're going to have like a 404 error or 403 error or something crazy, which could completely destroy your script and break it instantly. But something like a pcall can prevent your script from breaking and keep it running, basically. So what we're going to do is go over using a pcall now, right? So we're going to do success, error. I'm going to be honest, I haven't used a pcall in a hot minute, so I'm not so sure if I'm doing this right, but we're going to see what happens, alright? And since this function is going to be within its own scope, we're going to have to define a variable outside of here. And we're going to call our variable data. And what data is going to be is pretty much whatever we get from our data store save. So we're going to store any data that we get from our data store save inside of our data variable, right? So it's actually very easy to get data from a player. So similar to like a table where you have to index it with a key in order to get the value, right? Or index it with the index in order to get the value. With our data store, we just have to index it with our key to get the value or the data if you want. And the data can be anything. It can be a table, it can be a number, it can be anything. So usually what you're going to want to do with the data store service is use a table and have only one data store per game, and the data can be one big dictionary with like a bunch of different information inside of it for players' data, which is much better than having 20 different data stores, because Roblox likes to limit data store requests, which will make it very hard for you to use multiple data stores in one game. So what we're going to do is data now, and we're going to do save, which is our data store name. We just called it save, that's the variable, right? Save get async, I think it is. Yeah, get async. And you can see it tells us right here, key string. So it takes a string, which is just a key. Similar to how a dictionary with like string keys would be. So what we're going to do is usually for something like a data store, your key is usually going to be like the user ID, because the player's user ID does not change if they change their username, which means like if they change their username, their data will still be the same, because we're using their user ID to get their data instead of their username, right? So we're going to reference their user ID by doing player.user_ID. And usually for something like a data store, you don't want to just like have a random number for the key. You'd want to put something like concatenate it with a string to make it like a not just a number, because that's kind of weird. So what we're going to do is just do dash player to signify that this is a player's save. And that's pretty much it for getting the player's data. What this will do is it will return the value at this index or at this key, right? It'll return the value that is associated with the key that we gave it, okay? So that doesn't, it's not too complicated, right? But if there's, say, if it doesn't find this key, then it'll return nil. So data can either be nil. If the player has no data, it'll be nil. If they do have data, it'll obviously be something. So the way that we do, what we do next would be to check if there's data. If data, then we can set coins.value to the data that they have saved. Else we can say we can print player has no data or whatever. I'm not sure, this might be backwards. I think error is second. So if you don't know, this is called like a tuple here, where you define multiple variables with a comma, because pcall actually returns two values that we can store in two variables, kind of like this, right, with a comma separating. So we have error, which is one variable, and success is another variable. So you can think of them, they're just two variables, right? It's nothing too scary here. And we'll do if error. So if there was an error, then we can warn with our error to tell us what the error message was. Or I think that's how that works. I'm gonna be honest, man. I don't know how pcall works. I don't use it very often, and I don't remember how it works. So I'm just kind of guessing here. I'm not expecting this to work first try. I'm gonna be honest, but it's okay. So now what we do is, this is player added event, right? So once the player joins, we get the data that is associated with the player's key, and we store it in our data variable. And we check if they have data, and if they do, then we set their coins.value to the data that we found. Now what we need to do is, when the player leaves the game, is save their data, right? We need to be able to save the data when they're leaving. So what we do is we do players removing, or player removing. What player removing does is it fires when the player is leaving the game. It doesn't fire after the player left the game, because if we listened for after the player left the game, then they won't have data inside the game anymore. Like something like a leader stat would be destroyed by the time they leave the game. So we want to save their data while they're leaving the game, which is why it says removing instead of removed. And whereas player added is obviously after the player joins, right? So we'll connect this to a function now. And it's similar to player added, where it gives us the player as the first argument, so that's pretty simple and straightforward, right? So now what we need to do is get the player's data that we want to save, and then just save it to our data store, right? So it's not too complicated. So we just got to figure out how to get their data, which isn't complicated. It's just a leader stat that we're saving. So we're just going to reference their leader stats, similar to how we did down here in their click detector. Right, and I'm just going to make a variable called data. Leader stats.coins .value. I can't spell. So it'll take the value and it'll store it in this variable, so that way we can save it to the data store. Now this is called like indirect reference to a property, but in this case we actually want it to be like this, because we're just taking the number and saving it, so it's nothing too important. And now you also want to pcall wrap your set async, which is when you set the data. So get async, obviously it has get in the name, is for getting data, but set async is going to be for setting data, or setting a key in the data store to a value. So set async will honestly take 2 arguments instead of 1. It needs to know the key that we are saving it at, and it also needs to know the data that we are setting it to. So we're just going to be setting it to a number. So we're just going to be using our data variable here to set it. And this doesn't return anything, I don't think. It might, but we're not going to be using anything that it returns right now. So that'll do that. And what we'll do is we'll check if there's an error, and if there is, then we will warn the output about the error, to let us know that there was an error saving, pretty much. and that's what that will tell us. So now all you gotta do is actually publish the game to Roblox. So I'm gonna do that real quick. Oh, I'm so good at spelling. Turn off team create because that is fucking an abomination of Roblox for sure. Go to game settings, and now what we need to do is where is it? Security. Allow enable studio access to API services, which will allow us to do things as Datastores even says so right here inside of studio. So now what we'll do is we'll play, and I'll hit view to see the error that I get. Ah, see, it worked. So it says player has no data because obviously we don't have any data yet because we just joined the game for the first time with our data store being created, right? So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and get us some coins right now. We're going on a hard grind. We're going fucking crazy right now. We just got 400 coins, guys. All right, we're fucking rich, big ballin'. All right, so now we're gonna lead the game. Go get some bitches or something, right? And we join back later once we got all the girls. And you can see it saved and loaded our data just as intended, right? And somehow I remembered how to use pcall, even though I haven't used it in like a century or some shit. So now what I want to do is add a few more prints so maybe you can get a better visual of what's going on in case you didn't understand, right? So what I'll do is I'll print right here, pretty much saying that we're going to take data, or what we're going to do is getting data from, and then we'll concatenate our key here. This is just basically our key, which is just the user ID and dash player. And then we'll do if data, then we'll print received data from, and then we'll go ahead and add our key there, pretty much telling us that we got the data and we set its value to something. Now what we'll do down here is we'll do saving data to saving data, and right here we'll add, I could be using string.format for that, but that's for fucking losers, so we don't care about that right now. Saving data to, and then it will tell us the key that we're saving it to. Alright, and that should help us out a little bit to get a better visual of what's going on. So I'll go ahead and output, and you can see it says getting data from my user ID dash player, and then it says receive data from my username dash player. So it tells us that it goes into here to get the player's user ID. It skips over this because there's no error, and then it checks if there's data, and there is, right? Then it runs this, receive data from player. Now, say I want to get some more coins. Now we got 500, really going crazy now, right? And we leave the game, and so now it says saving data 500, which is the data that we're saving, to our key, which is just our username dash player, right? So that's an easy way of thinking about it. You can just think about it as like a dictionary or a table. And now what I'm going to do is show you how to save like multiple values, because obviously you're going to want to save more in your game than just coins. So usually what you're going to want to do is save, instead of just one value, you'll save a table. And inside this table you could have things like the player's coins, you know, how much their pets, whatever the fuck you save in Roblox games, I don't know, their skins, their guns, whatever, right? So whatever they would have would be saved inside this table, and then you can load it on the when the player joins and set all their values. And obviously it's going to be very unique for each game. Everybody's going to handle their data very differently. There's also some modules that are very good for helping you manage your data, like Datastore 2 and Profile Service, but Datastore 2, in my opinion, is honestly pretty garbage. I do not recommend using it, but you know, if you want to use Datastore 2 or whatever and be stupid or something, you can use it. But profile service, pretty goated. And then you also have the really crazy option of using an external database and creating your own API to use a professional database, which gives you a lot more freedom as far as what you can and can't do, allowing you to do things like you know, access the database across different games, or access the database inside of like a Discord bot or things like that. But of course, hosting that would cost a little bit of money, which, as we all know, if you're watching this video, you're probably like 12 or something and have no money, you're broke. So yeah, we know that's not happening, right? So really, you can save data and load data as a table just the same as we're doing coins. So really what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to make a for loop, and what we're going to do is loop through our leader stats and save all the leader stats into the table, or put them in the table in ipairs player dot leader stats, and we'll use get children to get all the leader stats. And what we'll do is table.insert. Actually no, I'm not gonna do that. Yeah, I'll do this instead. Data, and we'll do leaderstat.name equals leaderstat.value. So what I'll do is I'll create a dictionary with our data, and each index will be the name of the leader stat, and the value will be the value of the leader stat. Something to keep note about data stores is you cannot save instances inside of a data store. So something like a part, you can't just take the part reference and save it inside the data store. It won't work like that. You can always save like normal data types, so something like a table, numbers, strings, boolean values, nil. Those things are really all that you can save inside of a data store. You can't save stuff like C-frame. I don't think you can save vector 3s either, or other things like that. You can't really save special data types or other things. You can always save normal data types, so it's something to keep in mind when you're using data stores. Is if you want to save something like a part, you would have to pretty much get all of its properties and break them down into like strings or something like that to kind of simplify it, make all the properties simple, and then save it. And then once you load the game, you have to figure out a way of taking that string and turning it back into all the properties for the part, and then obviously creating the part with the properties, right? So that's something to keep in mind. But now we have data, which is a table, and say we want to add another leader stat. Maybe we'll add a rebirth, I guess. Now we're making a simulator, so that's pretty cool. So now we have rebirths, and we want to save both coins and rebirths. So this will automatically do it pretty much. This will save every leader stat in our leader stats folder with this for loop, right? It gets every leader stat with get children, and then it creates an index inside of our data table with the value of the leader stat. Pretty simple, right? And what we can even do here is, actually no, we are printing out the data here, so we don't even need to do that, right? I was gonna try and make it, I was gonna print out data here, but we don't need to do that because we already are. So now what we need to do is load it properly, because now we're just doing coin stat value equals data, but data is going to be a table now, so this isn't going to work. So what we're gonna have to do is now find a way of basically loading the data on the server. So this is actually going to be pretty easy because of the way that we set this up, or I set it up. For IV in pairs, data do. So our data is a dictionary, so we're going to loop through it with pairs instead of I pairs. And what we're going to do is we're going to get our leader stats, and we're going to index it with the I. The I is obviously going to be the name of our leader stat, right? Like we defined down here. And then what we're going to do is get its dot value, and set it to v, which is going to be the value that we saved. And what I can do actually here is I can print I and v here to kind of give you a visual representation of what I and v is. And then I'm going to go ahead and update our data store to be another one, or change it to be data store or save to, because we changed it, so I don't want it being like all kind of funky with like trying to load a number value even though it's supposed to be a dictionary or whatever, if that makes sense. I'm going to give us a rebirth giver as well, so that way we can give ourselves rebirths to test the save. So we're going to go ahead and play our game. You can see we have coins and rebirths now. Hopefully no errors. You can see no put data. So what I'm going to do now is get some coins, maybe like 110, and a few rebirths, maybe 3. And in our output now, I'm going to go ahead and click stop. Attempt to concatenate table with string. So we got an error. There's our error. It did actually properly save because we were printing after the set async, and the error is just something having to do with our data because we can't actually concatenate a table with a string. I don't know what I was doing, I'm going to be honest. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to print data here, but it's a little late for that, but it's okay. So once we play the game now, you'll see that it says getting data from player, and then it says rebirth 3, coins 110, and receive data. So what we can do is we can go back in our script and see what it's doing. So getting data from our key, we know what that's doing, right? Using getAsync to get the data, and then it checks if we have data, and we do. So now what it does is it loops through our dictionary, which we saved, and it prints out the index and the value. So the index is the name of the name of our leader stat, and the value is just the value. So it prints out rebirths 3 because we have 3 rebirths, and it prints out coins 110 because we have 110 coins. And then it finds the leader stat with the matching name, and it sets its value to the value. And then once it's done, it printed received data like it should. So it worked pretty much as it should. And if we hit the stop, it will also give us the save. So this is our dictionary that we created down here, right here. This is the dictionary that we created that we're saving right here. It printed it out like we told it to right here, right? So that's kind of the basic idea of how data stores work. There's some more things like securing your data a little bit better, like if the server crash or using update async and things like that, but I'm not going to go over that in this video. I'm going to be honest, I think you should use profile service instead. I'm definitely going to be making a video on using profile service in the future, so be ready for that video because profile service is definitely goated. But thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.